For more than half my life, I lived in the old town of Watermay. I live in the city now, but I will never forget the month of October 1998. There's a highway less than 100 yards away from our home. I lived in a compound shared by 3 families. From our house, you'd have to walk a gentle uphill slope for about a minute before you could reach the gate and see the road stretching from north to south. With 2 lanes and spacious shoulders on either side, it's part of the national roadways system. It looks like a highway just like any other if you didn't know about its body count. Watermay Highway was known to take lives year after year. Road accidents, hits and runs, people jumping off the bridge and drowning in the river. The highway and that particular bridge near us were typically in the local news for those reasons. People in Watermay would say there's a lady who died a violent death there decades ago, and ever since claims the lives of motorists and pedestrians as retribution. Yes, I know, it sounds like one of those cliché stories about killer highways and vengeful ghosts that couldn't find peace. But if you were a 10-year-old kid living in a small, quiet town and surrounded by religious and superstitious people, you'd probably believe it too. Townsfolk would talk about this lady walking and sometimes sitting on the ledge of the 100-foot concrete bridge that towers above the Watermay River. Whenever she shows up, a bloody road accident would follow shortly, likely on the same day or within a few days later. I feared the lady of the highway. Parents would typically use the story to scare their kids off of staying out too late and playing in the streets that feed the main road. Back then, I remember Watermay town to get very dark and quiet early in the evening. From our house, you'd hear trucks and buses speeding across the highway, dashing incredibly fast, and would surely shred you on the spot should you get hit. You feel the 10-wheelers from the distance as they produce a distinct noise and vibration on the ground as they cross the bridge. Of course, as a kid, I had no business being there above the hill and on the highway, but I vividly remember dreaming about the highway one night. It's pitch black in my dream, and there's no one else. It's from a first-person point of view, and I see my bare feet walking on the highway. I believe I was headed to the bridge which has an arch bearing the name of our town. Even if it was dark, I can see the signage faintly. It said, "Welcome to Watermay." In the dream, I could see the faint painted white lines on the center of the road like they are weakly reflecting moonlight. I looked back and noted I was heading farther and farther from our old rusted red gate. When I looked forward again toward the bridge, I saw a lady with long black hair and wearing a white flowing dress. She was at the side of the bridge looking down at the water. I couldn't see her face, but I thought she was a young woman, probably in her 20s. I think she noticed me. She went to turn her head in my direction. That's when I woke up. What a very weird dream, I thought. I got up out of bed to get some water when I noticed the lights on the living room were turned on. It was about 12 midnight, and my mom and dad were awake. I immediately told them that I saw the lady of the highway in my dream. My parents looked at each other, and my mom told me that it's all right, and that I should go back to bed and pray before returning to sleep. The next morning, I learned why Mom and Dad was awake in the living room late last night. A bus bound for the city has hit a neighbor who was crossing the highway on his way home from work. He died on the spot, just a few feet away from the bridge. It was the same spot I stood on my dream. I felt sorry for the guy. He lived just a few houses away from ours. I heard my grandparents and other elders in our compound talking, saying that the lady of the highway has claimed another life again. They talked about an elderly woman who got hit by a speeding truck nearby in the previous year. An old family friend, she was selling homemade pastries on the streets and probably miscalculated her distance from the road. She also died on the spot. I never talked about my dream with anyone again. I thought it was just plain coincidence, but I was also pretty spooked. Why would I see that lady in a dream within minutes from when someone died on that road? Then I thought that was the end of it. It was 1998, and it was getting colder. October came. I typically had naps whenever I got home from school. Out of the blue, I had this recurring dream each afternoon that I am out walking barefoot on the highway again. This time, it was set in the afternoon, and the sky was orange. The road was empty, and I was just there, alone and walking toward the bridge. It's uneventful, actually. The first time I had that dream, I immediately asked my parents if something happened, and there was nothing. Just a harmless dream, I guess. It happened again for a few more days, and I hoped that would be the end of it. However, it felt like the dreams were building up to something. On Thursday afternoon, the dream was different. Was it a dream in the first place? I knew I was awake from my nap, and I was on the sofa in the living room. From the corner of my eye on my right, I could see my mom watching an afternoon drama on TV. On my left, I could see the lady. I'm sure it was her, with that long, flowing white dress. I noticed that her hair was long and curly. I couldn't make her face out, but I believe it was expressionless. What scared me, though, was that her mouth was open unnaturally wide. It's like it was forced open, and I could see her teeth and tongue all motionless inside her wide-open mouth. I couldn't move or avert my gaze. Then, in a flash, she was a foot closer, now partially covering the television from my view. It happened again. I realized she wasn't walking. She just pops out of existence and appear on a tile closer to me at the exact same instance every time. My mother was not noticing any of this. I couldn't shut my eyes. I know I was screaming, but I was not making any noise. She popped out and popped in again, much closer this time. I could see her bare feet in the tiled floor right below my sofa. In my mind, I was terribly shaking, but I knew I remained frozen in the real world. She wasn't bending or hunching over, but I was sure she was moving her head closer to my face slowly. It was descending and getting closer and closer. Was she sinking to the floor? I was panicking as it got harder to breathe. I was forcing myself to get up from lying on my side. Just as her face and widely open mouth was almost next to me, I managed to bolt up. It startled my mom, who panicked when she saw me. She asked what was wrong, as I was very pale. Mom then swiveled the electric fan to me and got me cold water. I noticed my hands were freezing, but I felt really hot. I asked Mom if she noticed or heard anything weird, and she said there was nothing. I told her it was just another bad dream. She then said that I probably watched too many horror shows and I don't pray as much. Well, she might be right on both counts. I dismissed it as just another weird dream and was just thankful nobody died on the highway again. Now that I am older, I understand that my dream that day must be an episode of sleep paralysis. I've learned to cope with those, as I would have more episodes of sleep paralysis in my life as an adult. But what still puzzles me to this day is that I had that very unique hallucination that day. My tormentor was the lady of the highway herself. To this day, I still cannot explain what would happen in the following days. It was night time on the first Saturday of October 1998. I woke up to the darkness of my room in the middle of the night, sweating. I remember having a terrible dream. I was again walking on the same highway, alone and barefoot at night. I did not see the lady by the bridge, but I noticed something different this time. I felt that the road was sticky. I would like to give you a heads up that there will be some disturbing imagery in my story from here on. The once clean highway in my dream was covered in what I would describe as pieces of meat. There were streaks of blood and lumps of meat on the asphalt, and bits of them were sticking to my feet. Inside the dream, I wasn't scared. I was just walking without a care, slowly reaching the center of the bridge. I just stood there for a while and everything faded into the dark. When I woke up, I prayed that nothing bad would happen. Sunday morning came. During breakfast, I told my parents about my dream, and my mom made the sign of the cross and whispered a very short prayer. They said I should come with them to the church, but I said was not feeling well. They decided not to go and was about to clean the table when we heard a loud crash coming from the front gate. It was followed by screams from several people. We rushed to the window and saw that the front gate of our compound was busted, the brown metal sheets still swinging. Rushing downward the hill straight to my grandparents' house was a jeep with several passengers. The passengers flew outward one by one from the vehicle as it hurtled downward the incline and toward my grandparents' door. Then there was another crash. The jeep had smashed on the door, destroying all the plants and pots on its path across Grandma's front garden. I couldn't process what happened as it was done in a matter of seconds. I knew I was awake and not dreaming that time. My dad rushed to the scene. Luckily, no one got killed or was seriously injured. My grandparents were safe too. It turned out that the driver lost control when another vehicle abruptly cut them. They had to swerve and they crashed through our gate, tumbling down the incline. The police came to investigate and an ambulance came to pick up the wounded passengers. We couldn't believe what happened. If any one of us was at Grandma's garden that time, the outcome could be very different. We shared the lot with my grandparents and one of Dad's siblings back then. My cousins and I would typically play at the garden just at the foot of the incline, which was just dead straight from the gate. As things calmed down, everyone went back to business as usual. I didn't care much about how they decided to fix the smashed gate. Somehow, I felt off. I had this weird thought that the lady of the highway wasn't done. At about 3 p.m. on the same day, the quiet afternoon was broken by a soft thud and the sound of a 10-wheeler truck braking sharply. It was followed by loud wailing scream coming from the highway. Our whole family ran up to our broken gate, and nothing could have prepared us for what we saw. My dad told me to stand back and not look. My aunt then hurriedly escorted me and my cousins back into our property, but it was too late. At about 50 feet away from our property, there's a part of the road that had been painted with a long streak of red. A thin film of red stretched from a spot down toward the bridge. Then I saw a pinkish mass of flesh and a yellow slipper beside it. The slipper belonged to a kid younger than me. As my cousins and I were being escorted by my aunt back to our houses, we continued hearing the wailing screams. It was from the child's mother. I still cannot forget how visceral that scream was to this day. My dad was part of the town council, and we learned from him that the mother and child was about to cross to get to the other side of town. The kid suddenly broke away from the mother's hand for no reason and crossed the road by herself. It also happened that a 10-wheeler truck was fast approaching and it caught the child under it. The mother couldn't do anything. Everything was witnessed by the vendor running a small store close to the bridge. He, too, couldn't believe at what happened. All my younger cousins were crying. I don't remember how I felt exactly, but I had this disturbing thought that the lady of the highway wasn't done yet. We heard that the crying eventually stopped. The police and ambulance came, and then night came. At around 10 p.m., we heard 2 consecutive crashes. The noise sounded distant, but it was so loud that you could be sure it's from crashing and crumpling metal. I was still awake, and I ran to the living room. Dad grabbed his flashlight and told me and Mom to stay and wait for him inside. We also noticed my uncle was getting out from the next house to check it out. From across the fence and through the broken gate, we saw lights turning on from a distance. Everyone in town heard the noise. A few minutes later, we heard the siren from police cars and an ambulance. Mom was nervously waiting with me for Dad to come back. We could see only the flickering red and blue lights from the police cars, and we thought they've also set up some floodlights to illuminate the area. Something bad happened on the bridge. About 2 hours later, my father came back home. He told us there had been a deadly accident by the bridge and there were several casualties. It involved an ambulance and a passenger bus. The ambulance was speeding along the Watermay highway with a patient that needed emergency treatment. On the vehicle were the driver, the patient, 2 relatives and 2 medics. The first crash we heard was the ambulance flipping over and crashing to the side of the bridge. The next crash was from a bus crashing into it. The impact made sure there were casualties. It was a miracle that the ambulance driver survived with minimal injuries. Everyone else in the ambulance died. I did not see the scene. I only got the details from my father and the adults talking about the accident the next day. My dad said the ambulance driver was weeping and saying sorry over and over. The ambulance swerved out of control and flipped, and the bus heading in the same direction had little time to brake. The ambulance driver said that he just tried to avoid a woman who suddenly crossed in front of them. No one else was found near the scene that night. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened for a long while. What were my nightmares about? Were they really related to the highway or just weird products of my subconscious? Sometimes I'd wonder if there was something I could do to prevent the accidents from happening. On hindsight, I was just a 10-year-old kid having nightmares. There had been 3 brutal accidents in a row that day, and there would still be a few more in the years to come. The drivers involved in the accidents would often say that someone tried to cross right in front of them. The townspeople invited a number of priests and pastors to bless the highway. They'd put a cross on the bridge and light candles there, perhaps a way to remember the poor victims of traffic accidents there. Perhaps it's also a way to exorcise the place and bring peace to the spirit who allegedly haunts the area. I remember the town holding a vigil there and a couple of Catholic priests blessing a huge stretch of the road with holy water. Years would pass and I'd go to college and work in the city, only coming home to visit once in a while. The accidents became fewer and fewer to finally none in recent years. Has the ghost of the highway moved on? The dreams I had in the days leading to that series of accidents were really crazy though. It still weirds me and my parents out whenever we talk about those once in a while. Perhaps people have become more conscious about driving safely. Of course, I believe the installation of more lights and traffic signage in the area helped a lot. The city next to our town has been growing rapidly too, with new buildings dotting the once dark and empty edges or Watermay highway. I did not see the lady of the highway in my dreams again. Please drop a like and subscribe to Eerie Echoes for more horror stories. As always, thank you for watching.